Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In the heart of Washington, D.C., under the blazing lights of the Senate hearing room, Attorney General Pam Bondi, symbol of power and justice, now holds secrets that could shake the nation. Classified recordings, shadowy financial transactions, and a dangerous conspiracy all point directly to Senator Lindsey Graham, once a trusted figure now revealed as a traitor behind the nation's back. As the hearing begins, each revelation from Pam Bondi is a political bombshell aimed at the deepest network of corruption in politics. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. That day, the Senate chamber was steeped in tension, camera lenses flashing as if to burn away every secret. And Bondi stood tall, her black suit sharply fitted hands resting on the oak table, where a stack of classified documents lay. She took a deep breath, her voice ringing clear. Honorable Senators, I stand here today to expose the truth. Senator Lindsey Graham has acted against America's interests, covertly supporting actions to prolong the war in Ukraine. Despite President Trump's clear directive, murmurs erupted. Some senators shook their heads, others whispered among themselves. Graham, seated a few meters away, gripped his chair tightly, his face flushed. He leapt to his feet, interrupting. This is a witch hunt. I acted for national security, not to betray anyone. His voice trembled slightly, but confidence still crept through his words. Bondi didn't flinch. She signaled her assistant to display an email on the large screen in exchange between Graham and a senior Ukrainian official discussing millions in military aid. Senator Graham Bondi continued, this email shows you met with President Zelensky 3 times last year, discussing weapons shipments while President Trump ordered a halt to all military aid to push for peace talks with Russia. The room fell silent save for the hum of cameras. Bondi flipped to the next page of documents, her voice sharper. We also uncovered financial transactions between your office and a Kyiv base defense company. This sum, $2.3 million, was funneled through offshore accounts. How do you explain this? Graham slammed his hand on the table, eyes blazing. These accusations are fabricated. I haven't taken a dime from Ukraine or anyone. He turned to the senators, his voice rising. Miss Bondi is trying to turn the Department of Justice into a political tool to serve President Trump. This is unprecedented abuse of power. A reporter in the press row whispered, Graham's panicking. Bondi, unfazed, pulled another set of documents from her leather briefcase. We'll return to the financials later, she said, her gaze fixed on Graham. But let me tell you about a source. A former CIA employee requesting anonymity handed me a dossier 3 weeks ago. This dossier contains not only emails but also recordings of calls between you and a Ukrainian oligarch who directly benefits from the war's continuation. In Bondi's mind, a memory flashed 3 weeks earlier at a small cafe on DC's outskirts. A man in a baseball cap discreetly handed her a USB. This is everything you need on Graham, he whispered before vanishing into the darkness. Bondi had spent countless nights analyzing the data, with her loyal FBI team verifying every detail. What they found, emails, recordings, and money trails, led straight to Graham. Back at the hearing, Bondi continued. Honorable Senators, President Trump was clear. America will not be dragged into a senseless war. But Senator Graham's actions, from secret trips to Kyiv to pushing for drone and missile deliveries, have undermined our peace efforts. She paused, letting her words sink in. These actions not only betray the president, but also the American people who yearn for peace. A Republican senator, an ally of Graham, raised his hand to interrupt Miss Bondi. Do you realize that prosecuting a veteran senator like Mr. Graham will divide our party? Do you have concrete evidence proving he intentionally sabotaged the president? Bondi gave a faint smile, her eyes icy. I will present even more concrete evidence, Senator. But first, let me ask Mr. Graham, why didn't you report your Ukraine trips to the White House? And why were your financial transactions hidden through 3 layers of shell companies? Graham exhaled sharply, trying to regain composure. I'm not obligated to report every trip I take. I went to Ukraine to strengthen alliances to ensure Russia doesn't threaten Europe. But the louder his voice, the more desperate it sounded. The audience grew restless. A Fox News reporter scribbled quickly, while a small group of protesters outside the Senate chanted, Justice for Trump. Bondi looked directly at Graham, her voice lowering. Senator, I'm not done. We will move on to another piece of evidence, a recording, and I believe it will make you rethink what you just said. The gavel struck calling for order. The air in the Senate chamber was thick like the calm before a storm. Senators sat motionless, eyes fixed on Pam Bondi, who had just dropped a political bombshell into the hearing. The documents in her hand, black and white text, were turning everything upside down. Bondi, with the calm of a seasoned prosecutor, held up another copy of an email, her voice sharp as a blade. Honorable Senators, here is the next piece of evidence. A chain of messages between Senator Graham and a close advisor to the Ukrainian president discussing the transfer of long-range missile systems. These messages were sent just hours after President Trump publicly called for halting military aid. The screen behind Bondi lit up. Zooming in on the messages, one line stood out. We need to keep Zelensky in the game. America must continue to lead at the bottom. Graham's digital signature was clear. Whispers spread through the chamber. Some reporters leaned forward, scribbling furiously. Graham, his face now pale, tried to maintain composure, but his hands trembled slightly on the table. He stood, his voice shrill. These messages are taken out of context. I was only trying to protect our allies from Russia's aggression. Bondi didn't respond immediately. She let the silence do its work, her gaze sweeping the room, catching skeptical looks from senators who once supported Graham. Then she continued, her voice low and firm. If this was just about protecting allies, why not inform the White House? Why were these messages encrypted through an untraceable app, only uncovered through the FBI's investigative efforts? In that moment, Bondi's memory took her back to a late night at the Justice Department. Before her stood a young prosecutor, Sarah, who had spent weeks analyzing data from the USB provided by the former CIA employee. We found a hidden account, Sarah said, pointing to the computer screen. Money from a shell company in Cabe was transferred to a fund tied to Graham's campaign. A total of 1.8 million. Bondi had ordered a cross-check, and the results were undeniable. Graham had financial ties to those profiting from the war. Back at the hearing, Bondi turned to a new set of documents. We don't just have messages, she declared. We have bank records. A Ukrainian defense company controlled by an oligarch named Viktor Kolomoisky made large transfers to an organization linked to Senator Graham. These payments coincided with his push for Congress to approve a $500 million aid package for Cave. Graham leapt up, pointing at Bondi. You're slandering me. I know nothing about Komosky or any money. But his voice cracked, and some Republican senators began turning away, unwilling to be implicated. The chair banged the gavel, ordering Graham to sit, but he remained standing, his face flushed. Miss Bondi, you're tearing apart the Republican Party over a personal vendetta against me? Bondi smiled coldly. This isn't personal, Senator. This is about accountability. President Trump entrusted me to uncover the truth, and I won't stop. She paused, staring directly at Graham. If you're innocent, explain why the FBI found traces of your involvement in a call with an American general who ordered drone strikes on Russia without the president's approval. The question hit like a punch. Graham opened his mouth but couldn't speak. His eyes wavering, Bondi knew she'd struck a nerve. That general, Colonel John Harrion, a discreet figure in the Pentagon, had been tracked by Bondi's team after an insider tip revealed his frequent contact with Graham. Harron, behind the drone strikes in Ukraine, had acted without reporting up the chain of command, a near treasonous act. A Democratic senator, sensing an opportunity, interjected. Miss Bondi, are you implying Senator Graham is involved in a military conspiracy? If so, you must provide more concrete evidence. Bondi nodded, unshaken. I will, Senator. But first, let me emphasize Graham's actions not only undermined President Trump, but also pushed America to the brink of conflict with Russia, something no one in this room wants. Outside the chamber, the protesting crowd grew louder. One group chanted "Justice for Trump," while another supporting Graham shouted against Bondi. The noise seeped into the hearing room, adding to the pressure. The air in the Senate chamber felt stifled by the weight of the accusations. Pam Bondi's gaze, sharp as a blade, never left Lindsey Graham, who sat motionless, sweat beading on his forehead. She placed her hand on a new stack of documents, her voice resonating, cutting through the silence. Honorable Senators, Senator Graham's actions go beyond shady transactions. They are directly tied to the war in Ukraine, a conflict President Trump vowed to end through dialogue, not weapons. The large screen behind her lit up, displaying satellite imagery of an explosion on the Crimea Bridge. This attack, Bondi said, pointing at the screen, occurred just weeks after Senator Graham met with President Zelensky. Intelligence reports confirm the drones used in the attack came from a USA shipment that Senator Graham pushed to approve. Murmurs rose again, this time a mix of shock and outrage. A Republican senator seated near Graham bowed his head, avoiding his colleagues. Gazes Bondi continued, her voice steady but forceful. President Trump was clear America will not be dragged into an endless war. But Senator Graham's actions, from lobbying for drone deliveries to encouraging Zelensky to escalate the conflict, have pushed us to the brink of danger. She paused, letting her words sink into the audience's minds. These actions not only undermine the White House, but also keep thousands of innocent people in Ukraine and Russia caught in bloodshed. In Bondi's mind, a memory surfaced. 2 weeks earlier, in a secure room at FBI headquarters, an investigative journalist named Clara Weiss had contacted her through a secure channel. Clara, with disheveled hair and a fierce look in her eyes, handed over a thin file. "This is about Labs in Ukraine," Clara whispered. "They're funded by defense companies linked to Graham. He's not just profiting from weapons, but from these covert projects." Bondi had ordered verification, and the results revealed a complex web money from the labs flowed through shell companies, some reaching individuals close to Graham. Back at the hearing, Bondi held up an intelligence report. "We have evidence that biolabs in Ukraine, funded by the U.S., operated under the oversight of partners linked to Senator Graham. These labs are not just a security issue, but a massive source of profit for certain individuals." She looked directly at Graham, her voice icy. "Senator, are you aware that funds from these projects were funneled through a company in Cyprus, where you hold an indirect stake?" Graham shot up, his voice trembling, but trying to sound resolute. "You're fabricating wild stories. I have no stakes in Cyprus or Ukraine." This is an attempt to smear me and weaken the Republican Party, but the desperation in his voice only deepened the room's skepticism. A Democratic senator, sensing an opportunity, interjected. "Miss Bondi, if these allegations are true, then Senator Graham has gravely violated Congress's trust. But do you have concrete evidence about these labs?" Bondi nodded, pulling a summary from her documents. "We have transaction records showing $4.2 million from a Ukrainian defense company transferred to a U.S. fund where Senator Graham is an indirect beneficiary. These payments coincided with his push for aid packages to Kiev." She turned to Graham. "Would you like to explain why a U.S. senator is tied to such financial activities?" The chamber fell silent. Graham, no longer able to maintain his confident facade, sat down, eyes fixed on the table. Bondi knew she was closing in, but one obstacle remained: Graham's allies in the Senate. A Republican senator who had supported Graham stood up. "Miss Bondi, I respect your role, but these allegations risk destroying our party's unity. Do you think airing these issues publicly is wise?" Bondi responded, her voice resolute. "Senator, unity cannot be built on lies. President Trump entrusted me with upholding justice, and I will do so regardless of the consequences." She turned to the chamber, her voice rising like a declaration of war. "The war in Ukraine is not just an international issue, it is a web of interests, and Senator Graham chose to side with those profiting from blood and tears." The light in the Senate chamber seemed to dim, as if the room itself held its breath before a pivotal moment. Pam Bondi, with the icy calm of a legal warrior, slowly pulled a small device from her leather briefcase. "Honorable Senators," she began, her voice low but sharp, "what I'm about to present will dispel any doubts about Senator Lindsey Graham's conduct." She held up the device, a black USB drive. Her gaze locked on Graham, who now shrank in his seat, his eyes flickering between panic and helplessness. Bondi signaled her assistant to connect the device to the audio system. "This is a recording," she declared, "of a conversation between Senator Graham and Viktor Kolomoisky, a Ukrainian oligarch, recorded 3 months ago." The speakers crackled briefly, then a voice rang out, clear and unmistakable, Graham's voice. "Victor, we need to keep Zelensky in a strong position. If Trump cuts aid, I'll ensure Congress still passes the new support package, but I need that funding as we agreed. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Senators, Republican and Democrat alike, sat stunned. A CNN reporter scribbled frantically, hands trembling. Graham shot up, his voice breaking. "That's fabricated. I never said those words. Miss Bondi, you're trying to destroy me with dirty tricks." But the desperation in his voice only deepened the audience's skepticism. The Democratic senator in the front row shook his head, whispering to a colleague, "He's done." Bondi, unmoved by emotion, continued, "This recording has been verified for authenticity by the FBI. It was obtained from an insider who risked everything to bring the truth to light." In her mind, an image surfaced, a late night at the Justice Department office, when Sarah, the young prosecutor on her team, placed the USB on the desk. "We've got it," Sarah said, eyes gleaming. "This call was recorded through an encrypted channel, but we cracked the password." Bondi had listened to the recording repeatedly, each word like a dagger to the loyalty Graham had once professed to Trump. She turned back to the chamber, her voice steely. "Honorable senators, this recording not only proves that Senator Graham took bribes from a Ukrainian oligarch, it also shows he deliberately sabotaged President Trump's peace policy, pushing America toward the risk of conflict with Russia." She pointed at Graham, her gaze piercing. "You chose personal gain over the nation's interests. You betrayed the trust of the American people." Graham, now nearly collapsing into his chair, muttered, I just wanted to protect our allies." But his words were drowned out by the murmurs from the audience. A Republican senator, once a close ally of Graham, stood up, his voice trembling. "Miss Bondi, if what you say is true, this is a grave scandal. But are you certain this recording hasn't been manipulated?" Bondi nodded, her voice firm. "The FBI thoroughly vetted it. We also have witnesses ready to testify, including a former Ukrainian official who worked with Mr. Komoisky." Suddenly, another senator, a supporter of Graham, interjected sharply, "Miss Bondi, you're turning this hearing into a political circus. If you want to prosecute Mr. Graham, take it to court, not here." The gavel struck demanding order, but the chamber had become a battlefield. The crowd outside shouted some chanting justice, while others jeered against Bondi. Bondi, undaunted, responded, "Senator, I'm not here to create a circus. I'm here to defend the truth. And the truth is, Senator Graham acted behind President Trump's back, colluding with those profiting from war." She paused, letting her words sink in, then continued. "President Trump pledged to pull America out of senseless conflicts, but actions like Mr. Graham's, from taking money to pushing drone strikes, have jeopardized that effort." In that moment, Bondi recalled a brief meeting with Trump at the White House. He had gripped her hand, his voice low. "Pam, you have to do this, not just for me, but for the country." Trump, with a fiery gaze, emphasized that the deep state, a network of adversaries within the government, must be dismantled. Bondi knew this recording was not just a blow to Graham, but a declaration of war against those daring to challenge Trump's vision of peace. The chamber gradually fell silent, but the tension lingered. Graham, now almost devoid of allies, bowed his head, hands gripping the table's edge. Bondi looked at him, her voice lowering but full of power. "Senator, you still have a chance to tell the truth, but if not, the Department of Justice will continue its investigation, and I promise, no one is above the law." The chair banged the gavel, announcing a recess. As the Senate chamber doors closed, the hearing's reverberations lingered like an undercurrent, sweeping through Washington. Pam Bondi stepped into the hallway, camera flashes relentless, but she maintained a steely expression, betraying no wavering. The recording she had just revealed had dealt a fatal blow to Lindsey Graham, but she knew well the powerful never fall without a fight. Just hours later, a counterattack erupted. On news channels, a group of Republican senators led by a longtime friend of Graham denounced Bondi. "She's weaponizing the Department of Justice," one declared on CNN, voice brimming with outrage, "prosecuting a veteran senator like Lindsey Graham as an insult to Congress." Meanwhile, an anonymous article in a major newspaper spread rumors Bondi had fabricated the recording to serve Trump's personal ambitions. The news spread quickly, shaking the confidence of some of the public. Bondi, sitting in her office at the Justice Department, scanned the headlines. Her lips tightened, but her eyes still burned with determination. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. Sarah, the young prosecutor on her team, called her voice urgent. "Ma'am, our office was just broken into. Some documents about Graham are missing, and there's a threatening letter addressed to me." Bondi gripped her hand tightly, a chill running down her spine. The letter, forwarded by Sarah via email, contained a single line: "Stop the investigation or there will be no way back." A memory of a secretive meeting flashed in Bondi's mind. A week earlier, in a secure room at the White House, Trump had warned her, "Pam, you're poking a hornet's nest. The people behind Graham aren't just in America. They have money, power, and they won't hesitate to strike." Trump, with a steely gaze, emphasized that the deep state, a network of manipulators within the government and internationally, would do anything to protect Graham. Bondi had nodded, pledging, "I won't back down, Mr. President." Now the threat had become reality. Bondi ordered increased security for the investigation team and tasked the FBI with tracing the break-in source. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just Graham's doing. Viktor Kolomoisky, the Ukrainian oligarch, and his allies in the defense industry, those profiting from the war, might be acting. An internal FBI report revealed Kolomoisky had ties to an international espionage network previously funding smear campaigns in Europe. Meanwhile, Graham, though weakened after the hearing, hadn't given up. From his office, he summoned a group of advisors and Senate allies. "We need to deflect," he said. His voice spread more rumors about Bondi, about Trump, make the public doubt them. An advisor suggested, "We could leak that Bondi is acting on Trump's direct orders to destroy the Republican Party." Graham nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The next morning, another article appeared accusing Bondi of abusing power and blindly serving Trump. It cited an anonymous source from the Justice Department, sparking public controversy. Bondi, receiving a report from her team, immediately called an emergency meeting. "We're being attacked from all sides," she told Sarah and her colleagues, "but I won't let them win with lies." In response, Bondi ordered the release of a portion of Graham's financial records revealing suspicious transactions with Kolomoisky. Though incomplete, the report was enough to quash some rumors against her, but the pressure didn't relent. A Republican senator, previously neutral, called Bondi, his voice low. "Pam, you're putting our party at risk. If you continue, the consequences won't just fall on Graham." Bondi, unflinching, replied, "If the truth is risky, then that's the price we pay." In her mind, another memory surfaced. Her days as a prosecutor in Florida, facing criminal gangs. "They always threaten," she once told a colleague, "but they're only strong when we're afraid." Now, confronting the powerful network behind Graham, Bondi resolved not to let fear control her. She ordered Sarah to keep tracing the financial transactions and tasked the FBI with investigating Kolomoisky's ties to other U.S. officials. The political storm in Washington gradually subsided, but the tremors from the hearing left a lasting mark. Van Bondi stood before a mirror in her Justice Department office, adjusting her jacket, preparing for another challenging day. The recording exposing Lindsey Graham had upended the Senate, and now the consequences were becoming clear. Headlines blared across the news. "Senator Graham faces career crisis." The Washington Post's title struck like a final blow. Days after the hearing, Graham announced his resignation, his voice on television, trembling, lacking its usual confidence. "I'm leaving the Senate to preserve Republican Party unity," he said. But no one believed that was the real reason. The FBI, under Bondi's direction, had expanded its investigation, uncovering additional financial transactions between Graham and a network of defense companies linked to Viktor Kolomoisky. A partially released report revealed $3.5 million had flowed through offshore accounts, some tied to Graham's campaign to push aid for Ukraine. Bondi, though exhausted from long days of battle, felt a spark of victory. She summoned her investigation team, including Sarah and loyal FBI agents, to review the next steps. "We're not done," she said, her eyes blazing. "Graham is just one link. Kolomoisky and those behind him must be exposed." Sarah, with the zeal of youth, nodded. "We found leads to a company in London. They're connected to NATO and some Pentagon officials." Bondi ordered the investigation accelerated, knowing the network might stretch beyond their expectations. On the international front, Kolomoisky, the Ukrainian oligarch, became the focus of an Interpol-coordinated probe. Documents provided by Bondi's team triggered a transnational manhunt, shaking the network of war profiteers. A Guardian article revealed Kamosky had funneled millions through shell companies to fund political campaigns in the US and Europe. Though he denied any ties to Graham, international pressure forced him into the shadows. Within the Republican Party, the fallout lingered. Some senators who had backed Graham publicly apologized and pledged cooperation with Trump, but others, fearing Bondi would target them next, quietly lobbied to undermine her. A new rumor spread claiming Bondi was preparing a list of disloyal officials to prosecute. Bondi, aware of the tactic, ordered her team to release more evidence of Graham's transactions, quashing the rumors and bolstering her credibility. One evening, as Bondi left her office, she received a message from Clara Weiss, the investigative journalist who had provided information on the biolabs. "Be careful," the message read. "Kamosky has friends in higher places than you think." Bondi pocketed her phone, stepping out under the dim streetlights. She knew danger still lurked, but support from Trump and the public gave her strength to press on. Pam Bondi stood before her. Justice Department office window, the sunset casting a vibrant orange glow over Washington, as if to soothe the chaotic days past. The Lindsey Graham case was over, but the ripples from the hearing continued to spread, reshaping America's political landscape. Bondi, with her leather briefcase at her side, quietly reviewed an internal memo, a plan to reform the Justice Department, rooting out remnants of the deep state Trump often mentioned. She knew the victory over Graham was not just a personal milestone, but a turning point for a larger mission, a nation free from manipulation by narrow interests. In the weeks that followed, the Justice Department, under Bondi's leadership, launched an unprecedented campaign auditing defense contracts, scrutinizing foreign aid programs, and tracing networks like Victor Kamoisky's. A new FBI report drafted by Sarah revealed that the biolabs in Ukraine were not just research projects, but tools for certain individuals to profit from geopolitical tensions. Bondi ordered an expanded investigation targeting other potentially involved officials, though she knew this path was fraught with risks. In a rare press conference, Bondi faced the public, her voice low but powerful. "My mission is to ensure justice isn't distorted by power or money. We've seen what happens when personal interests override national ones. I pledge that the Justice Department will be a torch illuminating the truth." Her words, broadcast live, resonated with millions of Americans. Polls showed her support surging, especially among those craving a transparent government. Bondi thought of Clara Weiss, the investigative journalist who had risked everything to provide information. Clara, now writing a book about the case, sent her a message. "Thank you for not backing down." Bondi replied briefly, "We fight for the truth together." She knew that her legacy and Trump's wasn't just in defeating Graham, but in laying the foundation for a fairer system. As Bondi left her office, streetlights cast their glow on her resolute figure. Ahead, she saw an America changing, not through war, but through truth and hope. Trump, with his vision of peace, and Bondi, with her fire for justice, had together written a new chapter. The Graham case wasn't the end, but the start of a longer fight for a nation unclouded by corruption. The story of Pam Bondi and her confrontation with Lindsey Graham carries profound lessons where political polarization and faith in the justice system are tested. Bondi's relentless pursuit to expose Graham's actions, despite pressure from allies and personal threats, underscores the importance of honesty and accountability. In the story, the recording and financial documents are testaments to the power of truth, even against entrenched power. This reflects today's America, where citizens often question politicians' motives and the influence of money in politics. Bondi's actions, supported by Sarah and Clara Weiss, show that collaboration and courage from prosecutors to journalists can drive change even in a complex system. The lesson is clear. Every American can contribute to justice by speaking out, asking questions, and demanding transparency. Trump's vision of peace, emphasizing prosperity over conflict, reminds us that lasting solutions come not from confrontation, but from cooperation for the common good. Americans today, whether in local communities or on social media, should draw inspiration from Bondi to fearlessly confront injustice while building bridges instead of walls of division. Subscribe to our channel to follow stories of justice and peace like Pam Bondi's journey.